This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. I'm a little stuffy today, getting that fall cold, so it makes me sound like Barry White, something pretty sexy, or it just makes me sound sick, either or. Anyways, the guest this week is, man, I'm so excited about this one, Dennis Lyxen from INVSN. I don't know how to say his new band's name, but I'm going to say INVSN. Drop some vowels. You spell it INVSN. And some of you may know him from a little band called Refused. I don't know, maybe. And he also sings for a hardcore band called AC4. More on him in one moment. Let's get some business out of the way. Propertyofzack.com. Visit that website. Find out about who is touring through your city, who is releasing a new record, what cool stuff is happening behind the scenes of your favorite music scene. That way, you will be in the know and become a smarter person. Check them out. They appreciate it. I appreciate it. Become educated. Then, if you are feeling ever so generous about the show and you are liking the regular content that I'm bringing you, I would appreciate it if you dove into the iTunes store and wrote some sentences about the show, a little review, or if you just feel like dropping some stars as far as the quality of the show that you feel, 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, or I would prefer 5 stars, but I'm not gonna put that on you. You tell me what you think this is worth. And it's free, so you can't complain too much about it. Yes, and we are also a part of the How We Are podcast network with some other amazing shows that you should check out. Stuff You Will Hate podcast, Let's Talk About Feelings, and Nothing to Write Home About. All of those are really good shows, and you should also be checking them out because they put out a new show once a week. Others are a little more sporadic. You should check it out nonetheless. So I wanted to talk about a very uplifting, transcendent musical experience I had recently. As I mentioned on some previous shows, I am just diving headfirst into soundtracks, which sounds kind of weird, but a previous guest of the show, Spencer Hickman, he runs a label called Death Waltz Records. That kind of started my love for soundtracks. And, his label focuses on horror/cult movies. And there's a lot of other labels that have jumped up around that. But it's just opened up my supreme love for that medium and the way that music is contained. Something that I had been very excited about for quite some time was a band called Goblin. Now, some of you may have no fucking clue what I'm talking about, and that's good because it's weird shit. But so for those of you who are fans of the zombie movie genre, Dawn of the Dead, your Night of the Living Dead, George Romero, classic zombie movies, there was a burgeoning zombie movie scene in Italy and all throughout Europe, but more specifically Italy. And some of these directors, in particular, a guy named Dario Argento, he enlisted this band to score a lot of his movies for 20 plus years. And they were so versatile that they could do a horror movie soundtrack, they could do, a suspenseful soundtrack, a Western soundtrack, they could play whatever music you wanted. And they were called Goblin. They didn't really play out live very much, or at all, hardly. And they announced their first U.S. tour earlier this year, and I got to witness one of their shows. And it was amazing because they basically played against a movie screen that kind of showed clips from some of their famous soundtracks. And I don't know, it was one of those things where it was just like, fuck, this is unbelievable. This is such a unique experience. And it just kind of reminded me why I love music so much. It takes you out of everything you are currently experiencing, heightens reality. I don't know. It was just such a transcendent experience. Like, I walked away. I mean, they played for over 2 hours, and I walked away feeling just like elated, like high. Even though I don't do drugs, I felt like, this state of euphoria where it was just like, I can't even believe I just witnessed that. Needless to say, it just got me so stoked. And I had to share that with you because it's just, the power of music. That's why we're all here. That's why I am talking to you, because you care about independent music in some fashion. So thank you for listening to me babble about music, but it was just I had to tell you about that. Dennis Lyxen, holy shit, an incredible guy, has been involved in independent music for a very long time. He is out promoting his new band, his new record. They're on tour in the States right now, or just wrapping it up with Minus the Bear. And the new stuff is amazing. Like, Dennis is such a prolific musician where he puts out so many different things with so many different sounds. And this new stuff kind of has a, Joy Division, Interpol, post-punk sort of thing. And it's awesome. I love it. So I set this up through a publicist, and anytime I do that, I'm always like, oh man, this could just be stale. I just don't want to do your average interview. And Dennis was just, I felt like we could have talked for like 2 or 3 hours, and I felt like I couldn't go any further because, I respect people's time. I'm not going to sit there and just, babble at them. So this was definitely riding the line between me being a fanboy and me just trying to get this honest interview conversation out of the way. It's just always weird trying to put myself in that mind frame of like, man, I can't geek out too hard with him about this stuff. So here's my talk with Dennis. We did this over Skype because he's in Sweden and I wasn't able to meet up with him in person. So check it out, and I will talk to you afterwards.
A storm is coming for you. A storm is coming. A storm is coming for you.
Musical life, and I'll kind of hit on, basically all the stuff that you've done. Obviously, ending with your latest project.
Right.
And so yeah, we'll go through it. So, but I'm gonna take you back in time. I'm going to give you my first introduction to you as a musical human being, which was, I live in Southern California. So I'm going to take you back to probably 1995 at the Showcase Theater in Corona, California. Yes, I think it was. I'm fairly certain that you were on tour with Snapcase, if I'm not mistaken. I think I was about 14 years old at the time, 14 or 15. And I didn't, the only music that I was consuming was like, Earth Crisis, Snapcase. Like I wasn't going into the deep cuts of Victory Records. And so I didn't even stay to see you guys. When I say stay, I showed up late and I missed you guys because I think you were first or second. So
I think we were second band on. Nine Iron Spitfire was the first band. It was 1996.
There you go, 96. Yeah. You're right. That was your first tour of the States, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. What was the first impressions that you got when you came to the States? Because you guys were doing a fairly large tour. Was it just really surreal to be in the States and playing with all these great bands?
It was very surreal. I mean, we toured a bit in Europe, and we met Snapcase the year before we did the European tour with them, so we knew those guys, but we had no. In Europe, you tour and like the clubs are it's pretty well organized. Like I think the Snapcase tour we did in '95 with them was in a nightliner bus, and you get fed at all the places, and people take good care of you. So coming to the States, getting in a van. And just like after the shows, just sitting there by the merch table going, can we sleep at your place? Can we sleep at your place? And then we end up at some rich kid's house and talking about politics every night and people booing us and people getting pissed off because we were too political. It was a surreal experience front to back. It was like one of those weird things. Like coming into the States, growing up in Sweden and as a huge consumer of pop culture, there's so much about America that I know about before you get there. You see the movies, you listen to the music, and it was a bit surreal the first time over there. And that tour was pretty crazy. There's like some drama involved, and we weren't really getting along with the Snapcase guys. They're perfectly fine people, but we were very confrontational and super political and fucking angry, and a lot of people didn't take too well with that. It was like our weirdest, crustiest period as well. We all wearing like Profane Existence t-shirts. And we were kind of weirdly. We sympathize with more like the we were on Victory Records, and you know what that entitled at that time. And then we were sympathizing with like the Heart Attack scene and the Abolition scene and, all those like more noisy, emo political bands. And we came out on tour with Snapcase, and we play shows with Strife and Earth Crisis and stuff like that. And it was a bit weird to us because we were on that label. That was our chance to tour the States, but we didn't really fit in with those bands.
Right.
It was a cool tour. A cool thing about touring the States in 1996 and doing that thing. Sarah, that plays in INVSN, she toured the States in 1995. So
okay.
She has with her band, the Donuts. If
right.
You remember that.
Oh, do I remember the Donuts? Come on.
Yeah, she was in the Donuts.
Right,
Sarah
right.
was in the Donuts, and now we play in the same band.
Yeah. Again, yeah, exactly. You can't leave her.
No, of course not. She's one of the true original, like old school hardcore people from our hometown. She started her first band like 91. She's just always played in bands.
Well, yeah,
cool,
yeah. No, I remember. I mean, it's funny. It's funny to put that tour in context because. Obviously so many bands from the States, they tour Europe and they're like, oh, I never want to tour the States again because you actually, like you said, you get taken care of. And then and then you flip it from your perspective where it's like, oh, wow, we just have to eat shit for like 4 weeks and just figure it out. And it's like, usually it's the other way around for American bands, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not, I mean, now it's a bit better, I guess, but it's like, there was also a period of time where very few Swedish bands and very few European bands got the chance to come to the States. Because, honestly, there's so many bands from the States that are touring the States. So the last thing you need is a bunch of Swedes coming over, and it's kind of expensive with the flights and yada, yada, And so it was a weird time. I mean, it's a bit better now, that aspect of touring. But it's still like, we're from Sweden. It's like
right.
There are a lot of people in your country that has no real concept of Swedenness.
Right. Yeah. They're like, I think it's in Europe, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, not to, diss the Americans, but a lot of times people walk up to me and they say, man, I love Europe. And I'm like, that's just kind of weird. I mean, I live in the north of Sweden. It's like the opposite of going to Greece. It's like, it's like Europe's like one big country.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah, no. It's basically like, people, it's the same view as like Canadians have, where it's like, people, the west coast of Canada is completely different than the east coast of Canada, but it's just Canada. It's just one big thing.
Canada. Yeah. That's fine.
The scene around you guys started to build because it's like I definitely remember after you guys came over here and then after other record labels started to put out bands from Sweden, it was this thing, especially in the late 90s, especially within the independent punk and hardcore scene, where it was like, dude, there's all this shit happening in Sweden that's just like mind blowing. Like it's across the board. It's bands like obviously what you guys were doing and obviously what Donuts were doing. And then you had like, Fireside and like Kent and like all this weird stuff coming through where it was like, what is all happening over there? And I think that's, you guys definitely helped at least bring it to the States from like a heavy music perspective, because none of those other bands really toured the States.
But I mean, later they did, but it's, I mean, Sweden's been pretty, I mean, for being a European country, it's always been pretty synonymous with like good quality and bands, making it over and like I think I mean I usually say this, but I think it has something to do with the Viking heritage that we like to go out there and conquer and pillage and plunder and
sure,
make our way into other parts of the world like conquerors of some sort. So I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah, you're spreading the musical gospel, as it were.
Yeah, at this time,
Yeah. You yourself, were you born and raised in Umeå?
Yeah, well, outside, just in the sticks outside of Umeå, yeah.
Okay. And what was your, what was your family structure like? Do you have brothers and sisters? And what were your?
Yeah, I got two brothers and one sister, and my working class family. My dad was like a traveling salesman, just like normal working class parents. And I grew up. My dad listened to a lot of rock music.
Mm-hmm.
He when I was young, so my first records I stole from his record collection. But they were not musical. It's kind of funny. Like my family's, my mom and dad are great, but they're totally apolitical and non-musical. And then we're three brothers, and all three of us play in bands, and all three of us play music, and been a part of like the local punk scene for the past 15, 20 years. All three of us, which is kind of fun.
Because so basically all three of you guys are into like punk and hardcore and independent music. How did your parents react when you guys started to like you said put on your Profane Existence t-shirts and have all your patches on and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, becoming vegans.
Yeah, exactly.
At first, I guess they thought it was some sort of phase that we were going to outgrow, and then I think as they saw that like Refused was becoming a real band and actually touring the States and like they realized this is something that they're actually going to do for real. And now my parents are immensely proud of all three of us. And I mean, my dad has a T-shirt where it says, "I'm Dennis and Refused Dad." So,
oh my.
Yeah.
Does he wear it?
It's a bit awkward for me sometimes, but he's proud. He's one of those proud dads. Like he called me up. There's a TV show in Umeå that goes nationally across Sweden, and they called me up 2 years ago, and they said, "Do you want to play with INVSN at this TV show?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, we'll play it because they have musical guests. And I'm like, yeah, of course we'll play. I mean, it's in Umeå, so we'll pop on up in 2 weeks and we'll play. And I call my dad, and I'm like, "Dad, like we're playing this TV show." And my dad just starts snickering and then says, "Yeah, I know." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, and he starts laughing. I'm like, "You did not call the TV show and tell him to book us." And he's like, "Yes, I did." So that's how he operates.
Yeah.
He's just very excited. Yeah.
That's amazing for him to be, to be able to experience that, because it's like the thing that I always find so funny is when, like you were saying, when you start to get into it, your parents look at you and are just like, "Oh man, I just hope he doesn't hurt himself." And then, but then when you do the full circle where it's like, okay, I can actually make something that is lasting and impactful, and hopefully will be able to make a living for myself. And I think that's when it switches, where parents are like, "Oh," and then that's when it turns into your dad making a T-shirt saying that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's still like this discrepancy between like his way of what success is and my idea what success is. Because, I mean, for him, he's a working class guy, and he worked super, super hard so he could buy a nice car, and then he worked super hard so he could buy a nice house for my family. Mm-hmm. And I've always I never had any money. I always just been kind of like, but I've been living life the way I've always wanted to live my life. So sometimes he looks at me and he's like, "So Dennis, when are you going to write a hit song?" And I'm just like, "But that's not why I'm into music." And he's like, "Okay." Because he's still, for him, success is still something like when you make a lot of money, that's when you're really successful.
Right.
But, I mean, they're super proud of all three of us. Like, we're playing music and we're doing stuff, and they come to all our shows, and they're super supportive. So it's cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because it's always difficult, like I said at the beginning, for them to put it just put it in context for them, where it's like, I think it's funny with like the straight edge. It's like, I mean, I remember when I first started to go to shows and play in bands, and then my parents, like, once they kind of found out what straight edge was, they were like, okay, that gave them a little sense of relief, but everything else was still way too weird.
I think though, for me, like, I mean, the whole straight edge thing, I think with my parents and the parental generation, because for me, like, I got into straight edge and I became very political, and I became, like an outspoken loudmouth. And I think that to be straight edge, to be vegetarian or vegan, was such an all-out attack on everything that the like adult cultural had to offer us. So I think in a lot of ways, a lot of grown-ups got really offended. Like young kids saying, like, "I don't want to be part of your culture. Your culture, everything about your culture sucks."
Right.
So at first, I think, even the whole straight edge thing, as you said, one sense of relief, but it's also like, wait, it's kind of an all-out attack on us. So I think a lot of that generation was felt really threatened by the fact that we're doing things completely the opposite, which was kind of interesting. But, it's I guess it's for parents, it's always like a weird situation when your kids are rebelling. And I mean, for me, it was like the ultimate rebellion to be like, I'm not going to fall into the culture of drinking and the culture of meat eating and the culture of working a dead-end job, which is going to be completely different. And I think they felt that was
yeah,
first.
it's like it's like a personal attack. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
When did you start to notice that the scene that you guys obviously worked so hard to kind of build over the years started to have like kind of an impact, globally, where it's like, was it the first tour of the States where you started to realize like, oh wow, people paid attention to what we did and we didn't think that was the case?
No, not so much. I mean, when we did the first tour, our record just Exams to Fan the Flames just came out, and
right.
no one really knew who we were. Like a few people in the scene were like, these guys are kind of cool, but I don't think in Europe we were like semi big in a very small subculture.
Right.
So we were feeling that there was some sort of impact, and there's a bunch of Swedish bands, and me and some friends, we had this record label called Desperate Fight, and some of those bands were actually doing all right over in Europe. So you could feel a bit of impact. But the biggest impact for us was in Sweden, that it really changed the cultural landscape of what was going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until after Refuse broke up, that's where we realized that what we did up here and the music that we created actually affected music in the States and
mm-hmm.
all over the world, I guess. But it wasn't until because even the second tour we did when we broke up.
Yeah.
That was like, we played like 10 shows, and it was like coffee shops, record stores, basements,
yep.
art spaces. It wasn't really like, we didn't even play clubs.
No.
Like, it was just like really random, crusty places.
Right.
And then we break up, and then like, people call me and were like, your video's on MTV. I'm like, what? And all of a sudden we're like this semi-big band, and we're like, well, we're broken up. We left the States, we went home. So it was not until like later when we actually realized that
right.
it had some sort of impact,
Because I remember you guys were booked. I think the place you were booked to play out here in Southern California was a place called the PCH Club, which is all those things you were describing is exactly what it was. It was like, you could fit 100 people in there. And so, yeah. There was no illusions of grandeur. I mean, you were touring with Frodis. It's like...
Yep, exactly. Maybe that was our first mistake. No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
They're great. We tour with them in Europe, and they're great people. And they're like, well, we'll set up a tour in the States for you guys. And
yeah, you're like, sure.
It was what it was. It was like a super crusty punk tour.
Yeah.
And we already burned ourselves out on touring, and we didn't like each other. And then we came over to the States, and we was like, wow, this is not great. And then now we broke up and went home.
Yeah, I'll see you later. It's funny you mentioning all of the criticism that you were getting when you first toured the States, and obviously like all the political beliefs and the fact that you guys weren't shy about sharing it. I just remember when obviously the International Noise Conspiracy started to make an impact over here in the States, and that's exactly the sort of reaction that people had initially with you guys too. It's funny that lasted to that band as well, where it's like people were just like, shut the fuck up. Why don't you guys play the dancing music and stop talking? Yeah. Like, was that, did you notice that too? Where it was like, oh gosh, was it like getting worse, or was it like just as bad as the first tour you did?
It wasn't as hostile as on the first Refuse tour.
Yeah.
But it was definitely like, there's a sense of, I guess there's a sense when a foreign band comes to town and tells you how to run your political system, that some people can take that the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And as you said also, like, for a lot of people, music is some sort of, escapism. They just want to have a good time. They don't want some fucking sweet and tight pants talking about like political structures. That's just not why they went to the bar that night. We Refused. We came from like the victory, straight edge, hardcore kind of scene, and mm-hmm. we became that political band. And with Noise Conspiracy, we from the get-go, we were just like, we were super radical bunch of socialist anarchists, like from the first song we put out.
Right.
So I think it was easier for a lot of people to accept that with Noise Conspiracy. And we started playing kind of different kind of music because we wanted to maybe have a broader appeal and not be so stuck in a scene. And, so but I think by the end with Noise Conspiracy, it wasn't like when people came out to see us play, they knew what we were about. They were like, oh, it is fucking pink us from Sweden, and most people were fine with it. I mean, you know, sometimes we open up, we did a tour of the Offspring, and
Right.
we played in Lubbock, Texas, and I started bashing George Bush, and it was not a pretty sight. I must say. People are not impressed by the Swedes. I mean,
No.
I also remember we did a tour just a couple of months after 9/11. We did a tour of the States. You know, being the political, outspoken person that I am, and the band that we were, we wanted to address what just happened. And our you know, what we said between the songs are pretty nuanced and pretty, like, we talked about the fact that you got to see that there's a reason why this happened, and maybe not America's response should not be to put on the cowboy hat and go to war so more innocent people lose their lives. It was kind of a very balanced take on 9/11.
Right.
But people were angry.
Right.
People were screaming that we were fucking Talibans and get the fuck out of America. And it got nasty a couple of times. But
Sure. Well,
I mean, you remember those shows, you know?
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, for sure. Those are things you don't forget. I always distinctly remember the idea of people, and this kind of leads into my next question, where it was like the next topic of the idea that, you know, you yourself, like, obviously you've been a part of so many musical outfits varying across the board, from obviously like abrasive hardcore to what you're doing with AC4, and then obviously what you're doing now with, you know, Invasion. Yeah. You've largely, I mean, you're going to have critics, and people are obviously, you know, going to, like you said, you know, call bullshit on you and whatever. But you've largely been able to kind of remain that sort of credibility, you know, where it's just like, oh, it's not like Dennis Lyxen is a fucking idiot and we can't support anything he's doing in the future, because I think that already would have happened. You couldn't have had all these bands and people been like, you know, is it one of those things where you basically just ignore the criticism as far as like, oh, cool, Refused is getting back together and is getting paid $1 million? Like, is it one of those things you just like ignore that shit and are just like, whatever, we're doing it for ourselves and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been called a sellout since like 1994. in so many various, like, you know, shapes and forms, that after a while you're just like, well, this is who I am. This is kind of what I believe in. This is what I want to do. You know, this is what's going. When I get on the stage and record a record, this is what's going to happen, and no amount of criticism is going to change that. And I think that most of the times you don't pay attention, you don't care, and most of the times that's the way you have to do it. Because if I would spend my time worrying about what the haters or the naysayers think about me, that would be all I would be doing, you know.
Right.
So there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and it's not that strange. I mean, if I were just a guy that played in a band, but I'm not that guy. I am that guy that will say uncomfortable things and will kind of talk a lot of nonsense and, you know, be a bit confrontational. And I think that once you're that sort of person, and you know, also creatively with music, I mean, I've never been afraid to try new things. I never shied away from pushing my own boundaries and trying new styles. If you're that type of person, you can't really be bothered with other people's concept of who you should be, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just like, of course, sometimes it hurts. Like, you read some shit on the internet and you're like, oh man, that's just wrong, you know? But at the same time, I mean, I got to be focused on why I play music and why I want to play music, and sort of like, what drives me creatively and politically and, you know, socially, and stay focused on that. And I think, as you said about credibility, I think after a while, people, like, they might not agree with my politics. They might not agree with everything I released or said, but there's a certain gravity to the fact that I've been doing this for 20 years now.
Right.
Putting out records, talking shit in interviews, putting out, you know, sweaty live performances with different types of bands, and that's just who I am. And if you are a fan of music, and really a fan of music, you'll appreciate that and you'll accept that without having to like everything I ever done or agree with everything I ever said. And I think that's, like, for me, that I think that's the key point, you know. Just like, I mean, I've proven that it's not an image on my account that I talk about these issues or play different types of music. It's just who I am, you know.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think you hit on the point where it's like the longevity in just the fact that you're like, regardless of who's paying attention, I'm doing this. That speaks volumes to where it's like, okay, if there is some, level of success that a person obtains, that doesn't necessarily matter because they've actually been dedicated to this, scene or movement or whatever for, a long time. It's not like you just came in and were like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what's this?
No, I mean, I started my first punk band in 1987. And I mean, for years and years, I took a stab at the big times. Like Noise Conspiracy got signed to Rick Rubin and kind of tried to make that happen. It didn't really work out. But at the same time, I mean, it's like true story from last year. We're doing the Refused reunion tour, and it's a fucking big brouhaha, and people are super excited. And we're playing a festival in Germany, playing right before Metallica, and there's like 60,000 people in the crowd. And people are, like, as you say, like, people are, they're just doing it for the money, blah, blah, blah. They don't like the music anymore. We're playing this show. I get in the van right after the show. The other guys stay. And I get in the van. I drive for 2 hours to Frankfurt Airport. I fly to Copenhagen. I drive across the bridge to Sweden for 2 hours. I run up on stage. I play with INVSN in front of 20 people at a festival. And the next day I fly down to Italy to play with Refused. Didn't get paid. I actually lost money doing that show. I just wanted to play.
Right.
Like, well, yeah, we're playing a show with INVSN the same day as we're playing fucking Rock am Ring with Refused. Yeah, let's do that.
Let's make it work.
I mean, yeah, let's make it work. And it's like, if you can make it happen and someone is willing to pay you, that's great. If people listen to the records you put out, that's fucking beautiful. I put out a lot of records that no one paid attention to.
Right.
That's fine. I got to put out records. I got to play some shows. I mean, it's just like, that's my motivation,
Right.
Yeah.
This is not from, it's never been about obviously trying to, make your money. It's obviously been about something different that has turned into something where it's like, oh, wow, I can do this for a quote unquote living.
Yeah.
Speaking of obviously like, the Refuse stuff that you guys did, the world tour and stuff, I imagine that your head could not wrap itself around the fact that you were playing, because I saw you guys at the Glass House show in Pomona you did before the Coachella stuff, and that show was incredible. It was so much fun. I honestly had no desire to see you any other time just because of the largeness of the venues. I'm like, dude, I kind of saw this awesome intimate experience. You've played in front of large crowds. Was it one of those things where you just had to basically like throw out all your preconceived notions and are just like, well, I'm just going to have to act like this is a room of 150 people?
It wasn't that much of an adjustment because, Noise Conspiracy, we had our fair share of, we played a lot of big shows and we did a lot of festivals and we did a lot of support band tours. And I know how to work a big stage and a big crowd. That's not really an issue for me. But it was definitely a weird situation when you're when the biggest show you played is in front of like 500 kids in some fucking, dingy like youth center in Germany. And then you're like, so what's the next show you're going to play? It's going to be Coachella. Right. So it was definitely like for the format to take like a band as like a garage band, in a hardcore band. It was like definitely like coming from that garage type of background and making into some weird sort of arena rock. It was definitely like a very strange challenge and a very surreal. It was very surreal because it was like, this is not really what we intended this music to be like.
Right.
But then we start playing the big festivals and we start playing the big stages and big venues, and it really worked. Somehow we managed to like harness that weird energy and make it make sense in a big room. I remember the Pomona show. The Glass House was cool because it was like kind of intimate, and then we played the first Coachella weekend, and it was just, you could tell the other guys were not comfortable on the big stage, and it was kind of, we were a bit awkward, and we like, we had doubts. We were like, are we going to pull this off? This is just kind of weird.
Right.
And then in between the two Coachella dates, we did the Warfield in San Francisco with the Bronx and the Hires.
Yep.
Fantastic bands.
Mm-hmm.
And we blew them out of the water that night.
Right.
And it was one of those feelings that, wow, these are bands that are touring fucking rock and roll machines. Mm-hmm. And we pulled it off. And I think that was like, that show sort of signified for us that, okay, this is possible. I think this is going to work out. And coming home from that first run of the States, because we were like, let's do 10 shows. Okay, let's do a couple more. And then we ended up doing an entire year because we figured it's actually going to work.
Right,
but
right.
It was definitely a transition from playing like youth clubs and basements and then, you know, playing festivals and big fucking venues. So definitely a weird transition to make, yeah.
Right. Do you have any specific moments in your head from that entire, you know, obviously, like you said, that world tour where it was, you know, I guess it felt extra surreal, if that makes sense, where it's just like was it obviously like when you went out to the Coachella stage and you're just like, holy shit, like this is real. I have to do this right now. Or was it other moments like, you know, that transpired? It could even be these small intimate moments where you were just, you know, sitting in the van with the rest of the guys being like, this is weird, we're doing this again.
I mean, yes and no. It was like, since I've been doing, I mean, since Refused broke up, I've done so much, I toured so much. So
Right.
for me, it's like, at times I could look back and I'm like, oh, holy shit, it's those dudes. I'm playing shows with these guys. That's fucking unbelievable.
Right.
And I mean, also, because I've always been used to a certain amount of a struggle when you play. I mean, with North Coast Spirits, we were experts at going out to a crowd that was a bit hesitant and maybe a bit like, all right, let's see who these guys are. And then at the end of the set, everyone's dancing and everyone's having a good time. And it was a bit strange when the intro started playing, people went apeshit.
Right.
That was it. We didn't have to play. It was like the intro's on, you know, Refused is here, people go apeshit. I'm like, I was not used to it. So I was like, that was a bit weird. I'm like, just like,
yeah.
We won. We didn't even have to play the game. It was just like, we won the game. It was a fucking walkover every night, you know?
Right.
And that was definitely, there was a couple of times when we were playing shows and I look out in the crowd and I'm like, yeah, wow, people are this excited about this. It's fucking crazy.
You're like, you necessarily didn't even need to put on that good of a show and it would have been just fine.
Yeah, it would have been fine. We could have put on a pretty lackluster We never did, though. It's like, I take great sense of pride in that. I never do it half-assed.
Yeah.
And I don't care if there's like 10 people or 10,000 people. I never half-ass it. It's just like, it's so disrespectful. I see sometimes you band come out and they're like, you know, only 100 people showed up, and then they start turning their backs to the crowd and they play the short set, and then I'm not like that. Fucking 10 people showed up. I'm pissed off at the other 100 that did not show up.
Right.
I'll give these 10 people the fucking best show of their lives.
Yeah.
So we didn't half-ass it, but we could have.
Of course.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Every night. We could have half-assed it. But, yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't what you were about. Because like you said, you haven't done it. You haven't done it in the past, so.
And I think with the whole reunion thing, I think it was sensitive. It's weird. It meant a lot to a lot of people.
Right.
And it meant so much to us that I remember the first meeting we had about doing it, we were just like, this has to be phenomenal. If it's not phenomenal, we should not do it. It's like we owe ourselves, we owe the people that like our music that much. I mean, we worked so hard to make it that good. As you said, like it's like this band meant a lot to a lot of people, and people are used to seeing it in this intimate setting, and that's what they want. And we were just like, we don't want to disappoint anyone, at least of all ourselves. We don't want to go out there and be like, as you half-ass it, and then people are like, oh, it's only about the money. But it was never about that. It was always about, like, we want to make these songs. We want to do them justice. We want to fucking give the people that loved our band for the past 15 years exactly what they want.
Right, yeah. And honestly, like, removing all the criticism, it's like, just as an outside observer, I feel like you guys achieved it, and I'm sure you walked away feeling like you achieved it as well, because I think it's pretty transparent. Because I think people, especially this day and age in pop culture, I think people are just looking for honesty. And it's like, anytime you see something dishonest, there's a little thing that goes off in your head where it's like, dude, that, like, I just don't feel right about that. For any people that lob stones at you initially and the band initially, I think that was quieted, within the first, performance or two, where it's like, oh no, like, this is real. they mean this.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people that were not impressed. That's just how life is. But all in all, I think that we really we took it very seriously, and I think we really wanted to prove to ourselves that because it's a certain thing. Like when you're young and you're angry and you have that youthful energy, and insanity just fucking grows inside you and comes out in these amazing bursts. And how can you do that when you're like
That's
40
true.
years old?
Yeah. How can you recapture that? Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think we did, because one of the things I think we did was that we didn't want to be nostalgic about it. We didn't want it to be like, we didn't want to come out with a baggy pants and the striped T-shirt and be like, yeah, yo, it's 1995 again.
Which, right.
We were not about that. We wanted to play.
I was going to say, you painted that picture right now. That would have been absolute. Like if you guys did, your typical, Shape of Punk to Come set, and then you pulled out like 3 or 4 songs from Everlasting and songs to Fan the Flames, and you just dressed up like the, the music video you guys did that I'm totally blanking on right now, of like the slug.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. If you dressed up like that, I think you would have made so many people be like, "Holy shit, this is the best thing ever."
But I mean, I think it would have been fun. But I mean, I think our approach was, let's play these songs like we would play them right now, and not try to, as you said, not fake it, not try to make it into something it's not. This is a bunch of like 35 plus men playing super aggressive music in the sense that we would play it, and I think that was a good move. Not try to recapture something, but actually try to
right. This isn't a time capsule. This is like. This is we want to be vital for 2011, 2012, like this moment.
Even though we ended up playing Pump the Brakes,
right, which was great.
The last couple of shows in Sweden.
Right, I love seeing video of that. I was like, oh, they had to do that. Anybody that has done any research on I guess independent music in general. Knows that almost every major developed country besides the United States has art programs and music subsidies, where it's like that's why obviously you can point to so many black metal bands in Sweden, and how they're able to make a living is because they're living off of government subsidies, helping them to create the music that they're creating. Have you personally ever encountered that or tried to be a part of that system, and has that helped you? Just because I find it not even so much like trying to point a finger like, oh, you're getting support from the Swedish government, but I just find it so interesting that the United States has fucking nothing like it, and it's like anywhere else, like Canada, all these other places like obviously have supporting the arts, and I find it so interesting. So do you have experience with that?
A little bit. I think Sweden used to be way better doing that. We had a right-wing government for the past 6 years and not interested in the arts at all.
Right.
And I think also in Sweden, I mean, it's usually when you play some sort of weird free jazz, or you play like more fringe type of music.
Okay.
Pop cultural music is not so much subsidized by the government. But then there's like study circles you can do, and sometimes you can get support. I mean, I think Noise Conspiracy got like the government gave us like a tour support on a tour, so they paid for our visas and our plane tickets. And
oh, sure.
So they do stuff like that, but it's a while ago, and it's not. I think that whole system is being dismantled a little bit because, as I say, we have a right-wing government, and their take on culture is very, very different. If you can't make a living of your culture, then you shouldn't be doing it. But we used to be pretty good at supporting our artists and supporting, like, making sure that people could tour and travel. And there's still like study circles where there's like you can get money to practice with your band.
Oh, okay.
Not a bad thing. So, I mean, we do that even with INVSN. We have a practice space, and we fill out like study circle forms. So we practice 3 times a week, and then we actually can pay our practice space rental, and we can, at the end of the year, we can buy a new guitar amp with the money. So
right.
There's stuff like that you can do that keeps you a little bit more afloat.
Right.
But I mean, the harsh reality is that most people that play music, and you have to get a part-time job, but the way people live everywhere. You get a part-time job and you play music as much as you can, and then there comes a day when you're like, I can't really work anymore because I don't have the time to do that.
Right.
I've been lucky. I mean, I was just, for the past 15, 16 years, music is all I've done. Just play music.
Yeah.
But that meant I had to work twice as hard doing that as well, you know.
Because I find, I mean, obviously anybody that's ever toured knows that, you know, the whole, like, you know, band and press cycle and record cycle, like, that's a weird thing. You know, you feel removed from reality. It's just, you know, like you were joking around earlier where it's like, okay, you know, I'm talking to 10 people in Australia today. Like, that's not normal. And you feel removed from reality because you haven't had to, like, you know, have some sort of, like, you know, day job. Is the, you know, are there certain things that you do that obviously, you know, kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, like keep you rooted to the the real world, whether it's like, you know, the relationships you have and, like, you know, the, you know, whether it's like the musical projects, like, obviously, I mean, I could see AC4 being a very, I guess, grounding thing for you. Is that something that kind of kicks around your head where it's like, oh man, I got to do some real life shit?
Not really.
Yeah.
I had this big, 10, 12 years ago, you know, I had friends that their bands couldn't really make it, so they had to get real jobs. And
Right.
I got into a fight with a friend who said, you should try a real life. And I'm like, but this is a real life. It's just my life. It's just different.
Right.
It's just like, I mean, I get up when I want to get up and I live the way I want to live, but it's still real and I still work hard. And when I work harder than most people, but then I got a certain sense of freedom because I don't have a boss. I don't have, like, to punch in every day.
Right.
But then there are periods when I work for like 18 hours a day because it's just that period. But then, I mean, as you said, I mean, I think that if the Refuse thing that happened last year would have happened when I was 22, I think it would be pretty easy to lose your head and fucking go off in a different sort of trajectory. But I mean, I've been doing this my entire life. I played music. I fucking loaded the equipment myself. I tour managed myself. I, you know, drove the van on tour and next tour I got a nightliner, but that tour you know, so I always kept grounded in that sense that it is what it is. And I mean,
right.
Coming from a punk rock scene, like one of the things that you learn, which is like, it's not about being a rock star. It's not about, you know, making tons of money or getting the girls. It's about expressing yourself. And the people you meet on your way up or people you meet on your way down. And one week I'll play the fucking huge venue, and the next week I'll play the small venue. I don't really care. It's just part of my life.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, you don't let those outside definitions of success dictate your own personal happiness, because that's
no, not at all.
Yeah, that's when you get trapped.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I live in a small town. I still live in India, and I go out and hang out at the bar with all my friends. It's just like no one's impressed.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, you did that last year. That was kind of cool.
Right,
whatever.
Right.
You know, it's a good thing because it's like sometimes when you hang out in LA, it's like people define you by what you accomplished and who you know.
Right.
And here, people define you by what kind of person you are.
Right.
And I mean, it doesn't matter if I make fucking millions of dollars and I tour the world. If I'm an asshole, people are not going to hang out with me.
Right.
You got to be a good person, and that's just the one way. I think living up here keeps me grounded.
No,
it's such a small place, and it's just like there's no room for me walking around in sunglasses and leather pants, screaming like, "Look at me, I'm in the band." I mean, no one gives a shit about stuff like that up here.
No,
yeah.
that I totally that I could easily see that being your grounding experience, where it's just like, yeah, you come home and like you said, no one's impressed. It's awesome. I'm friends with a few people that work at Razor and Tie, and they were telling me, Pete Jaberga, he was telling me,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, he was telling me, he's like, I think we're going to be signing Dennis's new project. And I was like, oh, what is it? And he told me that's Invasion. And I was like, oh, that's great. Because I hadn't heard very much of it. And so the process of, like, you know, like you said, I guess it's one of those things where it's like you don't know anything else besides obviously like playing music and, you know, putting it out there. Was it kind of difficult to sort of be like, all right, well, here's Invasion. Like, you know, you'd been doing it for a while, obviously, but to kind of gear up and be like, all right, let's get a deal in the States and like, let's tour over there and like, let's do this whole thing. Is it one of those things you have to like, you know, mentally prepare yourself for that whole thing to do again? Or you're obviously excited to share the music, but the whole business side of things?
I mean, it's like, when we started this band a couple of years ago, I was kind of burnt out on touring a little bit. And, you know, we we got, I mean, as I said earlier, we got signed to American Recordings with Noise Conspiracy. It kind of, I mean, we were one of those horror examples of what a major label can do to an up-and-coming artist. So I was a bit tired of the whole thing. So, you know, I started AC4 and we started INVSN and we said, okay, let's sing in Swedish. Let's just play shows in Sweden and, you know, do that thing. But then once the band started coming together and you know, we were becoming our own band, I was just like, oh, this is a good band. Fucking the people are great and the music is great, and we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't try to take it to the next level. So we did the second record we did an English version of it, and then Pete got a hold of it via Mike Fight or something like that.
Yeah,
and Pete called me up and he was like, I want to sign you guys to Raise and Tie. I love this sound and I love what you're doing. Do you want to, you know, record a new record? And we were sort of in the works of writing new songs. We're like, yeah, let's make that happen. And then the business side of everything, like doing the interviews and doing the press and shooting the videos and shooting the promo shots, it's a part of what you have to do as a band. I mean, I wish you could just only play music and talk to the people that you want to talk to, but it's fine, you know. I don't really mind it that much. Sometimes you get a bit burnt out because sometimes it can take focus away from practicing or actually playing, but a lot of times I'm kind of fine with it. I don't really mind it that much. It's just a part of the game, so to speak.
Right.
And you know, if you work hard, hopefully, you know, there'll be some sort of payback.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as me that there's so many great bands, so many talented bands, and they didn't really know how to play the game, and they just got lost in the shuffle, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So many good bands that were just like, wow, those guys are going to be great, but then they couldn't get their shit together and go on tour, and, you know, they didn't show up when they were supposed to do an interview, and then all of a sudden they just fell apart. And it's a shame that it has to work that way.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just a part of your job, and it's a part of what you do. I mean, I'd rather play shows and hang out with my friends, but, you know, I don't really mind it that much.
Yeah, yeah.
8 interviews straight, it gets kind of tiresome, but, you know, just most of the times I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the attitude and the way you're describing it, you know, reminds me of, you know, like what you do when you're, you know, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old and, you know, starting your first band, just kind of like, well, yeah, like, you know, the idea of playing shows and hanging out with friends, like that's why you start a band. Like, you know,
that's why I still playing a band.
it's just incredible because it's like some people, you know, they may lose sight of that at one point or another because they get caught up in some, you know, bigger picture sort of thing, you know, especially with the most recent stuff that you're doing with INVSN. You know, it's you are, as I can't remember who put this. I think I saw someone interact with you on Twitter, but oh yeah, I don't remember who it was. I think Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses called you a musical chameleon, and it was one of those things where I was like, that it's a very good observation because obviously all the music you've created, while it still retains the same thread, is stylistically very different, and especially with what you're doing with INVSN now. Is it funny for you to see people that get into you, you know, whatever, say people get into you with INVSN and then are like, oh, I didn't know Dennis Lyxen was a part of all these other bands. Is it cool for you to see all these people have different jumping off points of where, you know, what you've done musically?
I mean, it's interesting because I think if you followed me from, you know, my early inception to now with Noise Conspiracy, and I did the Lost Patrol band and AC4, I think like the INVSN record will not come like a huge surprise. It won't be like, holy shit, that guy is just all over the place.
Right.
But I mean, if you're a bit scattered about what I've done, you heard a record there, a song here. Yeah, it might seem like I'm doing a little bit of everything, which is fine. As I said, I mean, not everyone is a music nerd as I am. So, I mean, if I like someone, I'll fucking keep track on what they're doing forever.
Right.
But, I mean, for a lot of people, it's just like they've heard Refused or maybe heard Noise Conspiracy, and they, you know, now they hear INVSN, and they're like, holy shit, that's just something completely different. One of the cool things about playing in a band and being a musician or artist is you can't decide what people are going to like about what you're doing, and you can't decide, you know, like what they're going to take away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I had people came up to me and like, yeah, this INVSN shit is awesome. I don't like Refused at all. And then, of course, the opposite. So it's like, and it's fine. And sometimes people will be like, oh, wow, you guys are a great new band. I never heard of you guys before. Wow, this is cool. And then they have no idea that I just did like a fucking world tour with Refused. It's just like,
Right.
for them, it's just like, oh, it's some guy in a new band. It's cool. You know, so it's like, it's everything. It's all good. It's like
Right.
whatever you want to bring out of it, it's cool for me. I can't really decide. I know that I love this band. I love INVSN, and the people in the band, they're my best friends. They're the
Right.
people we hang out every day. Like, and who wouldn't want to go on tour with your best friends when you have a band that sounds great and you have a record that sounds great? I mean, that's just a fucking dream. And, you know, to be able to express yourself and to continue to grow and challenge yourself as an artist, because that's what it's all about. I mean, you play it safe, you know, to put out some hardcore records and do something, and then maybe that'd be more better career move.
Yeah.
But it's never been about that. It's always just been about, like, I always told my dad when he was telling me, like, maybe you should write a hit single, I always told him, like, fucking life is an art project. And I want to look back at it and see, like, that I kept the fucking steady line throughout the whole way. And that, I guess that's also why people, you know, I have the credibility that I have, because I always just done my own thing. I haven't really worried about trends or this or that. I just kind of just did my music and did my art, and regardless of whether people liked it or not.
Right.
I think that's just how I'm going to keep on living my life for as long as I can, you know?
I also think something that's very indicative of, you know, like the ethics that you were obviously raised with and took a part in, was that being from a small town in Sweden, you never asked permission to, you know, like you said, start a record label. You never asked permission.
Yeah.
You never asked permission to put out the Straight Edge as Fuck compilation. Like there are so many things that you could have been like, okay, well, I'm not going to do this because I just, you know, I either don't know how, or this isn't what we do here. But I think that continues to this day, where it's just like, you know, you saw the idea of like, oh yeah, let's play some, you know, Joy Division-esque inspired tunes with some of my best friends. Why the fuck wouldn't I do that? Like, of course I'd do that.
Exactly. Of course. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's a good point, because it's like throughout the years, I put out a lot of records.
Yeah.
Not all of them have been great. I'm the first to admit. But I put them out, and we all have certain talents. And one of my biggest talents and assets has always been the fact that I get shit done. You know?
Right.
I have friends, but I have friends that are way more talented than I am. They're better singers, they're better guitar players, but they can't get shit done. You know, their records, might be recorded, but they're never going to be released. They're never going to tour. But I'm one of those cats that I get it done.
Right.
I'm very good at organizing shit. I'm very good at, like, getting everything together, and I always have, like, a vision of what I want to do, and I surround myself with good people.
Yeah.
And then you get stuff done, and that's just how it always worked. And as I said, like, I know people that are way more talented than I am.
Right.
Different talents, though. So that's just, and as you said, I never asked for permission. I'm like, if I want to put out a record, I'm going to put out a record. I don't, you know, I don't want to do polls on the Refused Facebook site and like, oh, do you guys think that I should do a band like this? And then people be like, no, please fucking bring back the Refused.
Right.
I don't really care, you know?
Right. Oh, you mean you're not going to, you know, put out your next record by fan funding?
Yeah, I might, but might not after Refused.
Right. Oh,
no, I'm just kidding. I mean, I love the fact that people are so passionate about that band.
Right.
And in all honesty, a lot of people that like Refused, they've been following my career for a long time. And a lot of people that like Refused, they still come out to check out to see what I do. I'm fucking super grateful for that. A lot of people who like Refused, they fucking love Refused, and that's it. And I'm fine with that as well. You know, if your favorite band like hate being Refused, of course INVSN's not going to be up your alley.
Right.
That's fine. You know, if you want to be like, I fucking love it, heavy and hard and fucking aggressive, yeah, I don't think you're going to like this record.
Yeah, you're like, this one is not for you guys.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, I wish in a perfect world that everyone that loved Refused is open-minded and they have the fucking great music palette that I have and they like everything, but that's not the case. I mean, and I'm fine with it. But it's cool. I love the fact that the Refused fans are very passionate about our band.
Right.
They love Refused.
Yeah.
Kind of like Slayer, you know. But that's like
Right.
understandable, though. If I wouldn't want to see fucking Tom Araya do some weird post-punk band. That'd be awkward.
No, that's a very good point. But that also that brings a very funny mental image of him playing some post-punk. That's amazing.
Yeah. Some eyeliner, like I don't know.
Oh, that'd be incredible.
And I mean, I've been that guy. I remember years and years and years ago, Rage Against the Machine just put out their first record.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was barely out, and me and four of my friends, I think David from Refused and some other kids, we went down to Stockholm because we wanted to see Zach from Inside Out's new band, and throughout the show, we were just screaming, "No spiritual surrender." Throughout the entire show.
So good.
And then like 4 months later, Rage Against the Machine was the biggest band in the world. And we're like, oh yeah, it's Zach from Inside Out's new band. I've been that guy.
Because so many people, it's like they refuse to, acknowledge certain people by, what they've done in the past, where it's just like, oh no, because that's obviously like, Zach would never refer to himself as like, oh yeah, I was the dude from Inside Out. But, people like you and I, we will always look at him through that lens. We'll be like, oh yeah.
Always. Always.
Which is incredible. And it's just like, well, I guess that's the hardcore kid in us. We can never take it out of us.
I mean, it's also, it gives me great understanding to why kids, would not be into this, or why kids would be confused by what I'm doing, which is fine. Mm-hmm. So I understand. I understand the hecklers. I've been one of them.
Right.
It's all good.
Right. Yeah, you're like, I get it. I'm not going to look down on you. Just know just know that Invasion is not for you. Maybe check out the latest AC4 record. You might be into that.
Exactly. Yeah. Or give it a couple years. Give it a couple years, you might get it.
Totally. Wait, maybe your 16-year-old brain can't comprehend this, and maybe your 19-year-old brain will be able to.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
It has happened to a lot of us. I mean, you buy a record and you're like, holy shit, this is horrible. And you bring it out like 5 years later, you're like, wait, this is an amazing record. So, I mean, it's a sense of like, I wouldn't say maturity in that sense, but it's just like a sense of what you hear.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like your references change and your perspective change, and maybe when you heard the record the first time, you were fucking angry, and you heard the record the second time, you were in a different place. So it made more sense. I mean, that's just also one of the cool things about music.
Yeah. No,
I have a friend, we did the band called the Lost Patrol Band. It was like a power pop band that we did.
Yep.
And I have a friend that's like a super crusty crust punk, and we released the record on my label. I sent 20 copies to his fucking crust punk store, and he sent them back. And he's like, I can't fucking sell this at my store. It's too poppy.
Right.
And 2 years later, he calls me up and he's like, Lost Patrol Band is like my favorite band. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. Like 2 years later, I guess he's breaking up with some girl, and so he heard the songs and he was like, wow, I love this. But 2 years before that, he fucking returned them to me. He's like, there's no way I can sell these records.
Right.
I mean,
this is poison.
Yeah, it changes. Your mind changes.
No, it totally does. I always think of like, I think the first time I heard Neurosis was when I was like maybe 16 or 17, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's like I heard through Silver and Blood, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like I don't get this. But then I think maybe not even 2 years later, I so distinctly remember this. I stayed home sick from school, and for whatever reason, I listened to Times of Grace and was just like, this is fucking incredible. And it's like, 2 years makes a world of difference in your teenage brain.
Yeah, totally. But that's why we love music. That's why we keep every day coming back to music. That's why we think about music, talk about music all the time. I mean, for me, like a lot of people, I'm the political outspoken person. Yeah, I think a lot about politics. I think way more about music. And soccer, but that's the totally different discussion. But I mean, music is something. That's why I still play in bands. That's why that's why I'm still here, because I love music.
Right.
I love music. I just every day I want to find new songs, new tracks, new records, new sounds. It's just like I love music, and I think that's also why the music that I created myself was very eclectic because I just love music. I've never been satisfied with just, all right, this is what I want to play. This is what I want to do. I've been curious. I always been like, let's try that and let's see if I can do this and push myself. And just because I love music,
right.
And that's just the simple truth of the matter. That's why INVSN is a great band, because we love music. We love to play music.
Yeah, no, I mean, that I think that's the most important lesson to take away from anything. So, well, Dennis, I really, really appreciate you hanging out and doing this for as long as you did.
No worries.
So there's Dennis. Great guy, right? I mean, just such a nice guy. It's so down for the cause, and he's just basically the same person as obviously he was when he first started getting into this, but maybe a little better dressed than what he was when he was 16 or 17 years old. I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane, as well as obviously being exposed to his new band. Honestly, check it out. Like, if you're a fan of anything of that genre, like the post-punk, like I said, Joy Division, New Order, Interpol, that sort of stuff, you will undoubtedly like this new record. So check it out, because I know Dennis would appreciate it. PropertyOfZach.com, 100wordspodcast.com, and that way you can email the show and interact with us on a weekly basis, as well as find out about fun stuff that I post throughout the week. Usually it's in relation to music or movies or pop culture, that sort of stuff. And the editor for this episode, as always, is Tom Richfield. Until next week, be safe, everybody.